In this Onshape tutorial, we're going to assemble all of our LUX components into one assembly. So we're going to create a new document and we'll call it LUX Assembly. Click on OK. And we get our design window. Now instead of being in the Part Studio, we're going to go into the Assembly. And here you can see now that we have a different set of tools. We have a tool for inserting components, and we have some different tools for different types of mates. So we're going to start building our LUX quite literally from the ground up. So the first thing we're going to do is to insert a foot. So I'm going to click on Insert, Other Documents, My Onshape, look in the LUX folder, and I'm going to find my foot. Now mine is coming up here already as a part. That's because I've played around with it and had it in other assemblies, and I've assigned it a version. If you haven't assigned a version to your part, when you click on it, it will come up and ask you to do that. There will be a link. Just click on the link. It will default to version 01 and just go with that. Click Create. I'll show you that when I bring in some of the parts later on. So click on that. Now, if I can move my mouse around, I can actually position this where I want in the build area. You can see that we've got an origin of the assembly area. I'm not going to click on that. In fact, I'm not going to click anywhere in the design area. I'm just going to click on the tick. And what that's done is that has lined up the origin of this component with the origin of the assembly. So that's something to bear in mind when you're creating your own assemblies. However, I could still maneuver that and drag that around. So I'm just going to right click on the part and then left click on fix. So that now won't move around. I can't move that around. It's fixed in place. Okay, so just a reminder that you can use the mouse wheel to scroll in and out, or the scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in and out, I should say, and that we can manipulate our work area by holding down the right mouse button. So I'm going to insert my next set of components. So I'm going to go to Other Documents, My Onshape, and LUX, and I'm going to insert a leg component. Now again, I've already created a version of this. I'll show you how to do that later on, so you might want to look through to the sort of 4th or 5th part that I bring in. So click on the part, bring it in, and I actually want 3 of these. So each leg is actually made up of 3 leg parts. Click the tick to say I'm happy. Okay, so we've got our different assembly options here, our different mates. And the one we're going to be using the most is the Revolut Mate. And as the quick tip has come up to sort of explain to you, this means that it mates surfaces of the parts together, but it allows them to revolve around a single axis of movement. That will perhaps make more sense when I put that into an assembly, but that's what we're going to use. You'll also see that as we move the mouse around on different components at different points, it comes up with what is referred to as a mate connector. So I'm going to select this mate connector, which is in the center of the bottom hole but on the face nearest me, and I'm just going to hold the right mouse button down so I can spin the foot around, and then I'm going to select the same one in the middle of that surface. So you can see it's mated the faces and it's also centered the axes. I'm going to click the tick. Now it wants to put another mate in. I'm just going to click on the X at the moment to show that I don't want it to do any more. And I'm going to right click and go isometric. So at the moment I can now rotate this. I can't twist it, but I can rotate it, but you'll see that it goes 180 degrees. Now that doesn't 360 degrees. That doesn't matter too much, but we can actually set a limit on there. So if I right click on Revolut 1 and go edit, I can click on limits. So I'm going to make that -45, press tab to go to the next one, and make that 90 degrees as our minimum and maximum. Click on the tick, and I'm just going to test that out. Okay, so actually I've gone 90 degrees that way and only 45 degrees that way, so I want to reverse those limits. So let's right click on there again, go edit, and I'm going to change that to -90 and make that 45 degrees. So this now behaves a little bit like an ankle. I can sort of move the shin as if I was sort of crouching down, but I could also sort of point the toe as if I was a ballet dancer. So let's put some limits on there. Okay, let's go and do another mate. So I'm going to do another revolve mate, and this time I'm going to pick that face of the top hole, and we'll pick that face of the bottom hole. Click the tick to say that we're happy, and zoom out. And now this time I'm going to pick the center of that hole, and again on this side, the center of that hole. Click the tick. I don't want to do any more of those mates at the moment, so I'm going to close that. And now we can see that we can manipulate that around. But the two are separate, and we can manipulate them as far as we want. So first of all, let's put a parallel mate in there. So click on parallel. We'll just zoom into these. And on the middle of that face and the middle of that face. Now I know it's disappeared, but don't worry about that. I'm going to click on the tick. It's come back. And now, if I maneuver one of those, the two stay together. And don't want another parallel mate. But let's go through to Revolve 2. Now, if I didn't make those parallel, I'd have to do this with both Revolve 2 and Revolve 3, or Revolut 2, Revolut 3. And I'm going to set some limits on there. I'm going to make that one -5 and that one 150, and hopefully if they're in the right direction, it gives us something that behaves a bit like a knee. So yeah, we can crouch down that way, so that's our 150, but we can perhaps just only move 5 degrees in the other direction as if we were locking our knees. Okay, so again, let's zoom to fit and put it in isometric. So there's our first leg. I'm not going to bring in the parts for a second leg and assemble those. You can do that yourselves, but let's keep building upwards and add in our lower torso. So insert our component, other documents, Onshape, LUX, and we want our lower torso. Now, you need to make sure that you've brought that in as one part. And you can see that I played around and it came in as 3 separate parts. So I'm going to create a version 2 for this. Most of your parts will be version 1. And once you've done that, I can bring in that as a single part. So there we go. This is version 2, where all 3 parts have been combined. As I said, I might want to modify those other parts separately, and I can go back to version 1 and do that if I want to. So let's click on the part and click to place it. Now this is actually back to front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the part and I'm going to rotate it round. So I'm going to use this to rotate it round 180-ish degrees. I can actually make that more precise if I want to by typing in the number and then click out the way. So that's the direction we want it to be in. So now I can get on and make this again. Now, because these two are linked to each other parallel, instead of having to do 2 separate mates up here either side of this, which would also have the same effect, I can just do the one mate. So again, let's do the Revolut Mate. Let's pick the center of this face of that hole and spin it round so that we can see the inside, and we can do the same on that. And we click tick. Okay. And there we go. So we've got that. You can see now perhaps why that slot is in there. And again, now we can't pull this up because the foot is fixed, but we can manipulate it from the body. What I would suggest you do is that you play around with that and find some settings that allow this to kind of look like it's bending. So you might want to allow it to sort of point up slightly upwards if it was crouched, and allow it to come back as if it was going backwards as part of a step. So you can play around with that if you want to. Let's close that. Okay, let's add in the next part. So insert my Onshape LUX, and this time we want the upper upper torso. So here we go. Not played around with this before. Create a version in LUX upper torso, version 1, create. It'll bring it up in the dialog, and then we can click to place it. So click and bring it in. And this is actually in the correct orientation, so we don't need to worry about spinning it around. And again, we're going to use the Revolut Mate. Let's just close that, click on the Revolut Mate, and we're going to pick here and on the inside here, and that's that part mated. And again, we could, let's close that down. We can sort of bend this around in all sorts of different ways if we want. Let's not worry about doing that too much. Next, we're going to add in a neck component. So insert, other documents, into the LUX folder, and a neck. Create a version, happy with the default version 1. And once that's in, we can click and bring that in. Now, this is for us the right way round. We obviously want to have 2 of these, one either side, but I'm just going to assemble the one side and let you guys add in the other parts. But you could remember, don't forget, click on the part and spin it around 180 degrees using this if you're fitting this onto the other side. Okay, so this fits on here. Let's pick the right type of mate, which again is a Revolut. Pick the right spot there, maneuver it around, pick the right spot there. We're happy. Don't want to add another one in yet. And now let's add in the head. So insert, head, create a version, right. And you'll see that hopefully this is in the right orientation as well and doesn't need spinning around. So if you're creating parts that are going to go into an assembly, it's worth thinking about how they're going to appear in the assembly, because it will save you a little bit of time in swapping things around, in orientating things. So again, tick that we're happy. Revolut Mate, that hole. Get the side of that hole. Click the tick. Now, if things aren't quite lined up, we might need to modify parts. We might need a slight spacer. It looks like that's slightly wide, so you might need to go back and edit a part. Perhaps the head design's changed slightly. Okay, so next on here, let's add in an arm. Close that. Insert LUX. And let's go our upper arm. Create a version. Create. And bring it in. Let's save ourselves a little bit of time now as well. So we go other documents. Let's bring in our lower arm. That doesn't appear to be there. Oh, there we go. Lower arm. Create a version. Create. Bring that part in. And finally, let's bring in our left hand. I guess just to save a little bit of time, we can bring in the lens cover as well. So when you're first doing this, it makes a lot of sense just to bring one component in at a time, so you don't confuse yourself and sort of mess up your design area or your assembly area. But once you start to get the hang of it, it saves you a little bit of time to bring several parts. Okay, so Revolut Mate. Click on there. And click on there. Right click, isometric. Let's cancel that just so that we can bring our arm around. Now what we can do is I can right click on that part, fix it for the moment, which will then allow us to bring the arm around so that we can assemble it. I'll right click on it and unfix it so that it will start to move around again. Okay, so this part needs to be orientated around the other way. So if I click on the part, I can spin that around 180 degrees. That'll make it a little bit easier to assemble. Let's do a Revolut. Do that on the outside. Spin it round. Pick up the inside of that one. And again, we can maneuver our hand by clicking on it. So we want our hand to be 180 degrees that way. And we also want to spin it 180 degrees, or about 90 degrees actually that way. And now we can make that as we've done before. So click on there. Click on there. We've got our hand. So we have our one-armed, one-legged robot. And finally we can add this on. Now we don't need this component to spin, but it's not going to matter if we just use a mate that allows it to. So we'll click on that and try and pick it up. That's going to be the slightly tricky one. There we go, down. It highlights it, we can just click and select it. There's the lens cover. So we go to isometric. That's one half of our robot assembled. And we'll have a look at another video how we can go back and